Hello, one and all. Welcome to Daylight Savings Time. This sucks. So, hopefully y'all remembered Daylight Savings Time. Although I think it'd be pretty hard to forget in 2015, I'm pretty sure 90% of our clocks changed themselves. Although we all still have the parents who call you up, did you remember to change it? So we've all been there. Okay? But I found out some really weird facts about daylight savings. Thought I'd share. I didn't even know it wasn't adopted until the US until 1918. Can we send it back? Okay. So, obviously, everybody tries to remember that in the fall you move your clocks forward an hour. This always gets way too complex for me. All I try to do is remember that in spring, you spring forward, in fall, you fall back, and I do obviously enjoy the extra hour's sleep on this last weekend when it was needed very much, but there's literally no benefit to doing this whatsoever. That is what I have now learned through daylight savings time. There's only two things that I have ever heard daylight savings time pitched for as a reason we keep it. One, farmers. I just heard that they need it. I don't know why, I don't know if I've even ever actually talked to a farmer about it, but growing up, everybody always said that farmers need daylight savings time. So you just, in your head, you're like, okay, farming, that's fucking important. Let's give it to them. But I was looking up farming, along with any other scheduled activity or job, is actually hindered by daylight savings time, and they would actually like to scrap it for the most part. If you look into that, most farmers actually do not like daylight savings time. Very interesting. And the other being energy saving techniques, mainly due to incandescent light bulbs. Incandescent light bulbs use a lot of energy, and they were the most widely used light bulb back in the diesel. So obviously it made sense that, hey, if we want to cut down some costs and save some energy, let's extend daylight during the summer hours, and then we'll have more of it. But every time you extended it, they had to think about, okay, well, in the winter we're going to have to move it back, because otherwise we are going to have no daylight. And then also, honestly, a lot of us don't even think, half the damn world isn't even affected by daylight savings time, and there's actually quite a few states within our own country that don't even abide by it. So, is it really something we need to keep going? Many people either adjust to waking up a little earlier to still achieve the same amount of daylight, but starting work later, which happens to work just fine. I am... So this little shit stain, George Hudson, down in New Zealand, is the reason we're even doing this. Well, not exactly, but he was the first to propose the idea. So back in 1895, had a job that allotted him a lot of free time after work. Therefore, he liked to take up his favorite activity of collecting insects. Yes, kids, we have daylight savings time, so a man could go and collect insects. That's real. That is real. Anyway, okay, so 1895, he proposed daylight savings time. I think he asked for 2 extra hours of daylight so that he would have time to collect insects. And then the New Zealand government reviewed it and finally decided that it was something they could implement. However, it wasn't until 1916, Germany, along with Austria or Hungary, were the first large industrial-sized countries to adopt it, and with most countries joining in the 1970s during the energy crisis, which actually led me to think, was that energy crisis, like, fucking planned? Because it seems like daylight savings time literally benefited very few. So I decided to peer over to the 1970s energy crisis, and it does show that in 1973, along with 1979, there were some pretty big involvements of energy shortages, a lot of it being petroleum shortages, and a lot of it being countries that the USA does not have a good reputation of working with. Why wasn't this planned for? Anyway, who expects their government to be run by smart, forward-thinking people, right? Okay, so problem being here is the Middle East was controlling the exports of oil. They didn't have the exports that the world needed going out. So countries like the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and then most of Western Europe all suffered from this. Those were all countries that needed oil imported, and due to the lack of oil importing, they were going through or experiencing shortages on energy. And in 1979, I believe that was the largest one, and that was interrupted due to the Iranian Revolution. However, there is something to be said about looking into the energy crisis and trying to connect the dots. I'm not sleuth enough yet, they're too good. But something just seems really weird that most people were not on board to have this. It didn't really benefit many, and the people whose interest it did pique were companies pushing for it. And in the mid-80s, companies like Clorox and then 7-Eleven joined a coalition to back daylight savings time and get it pushed through government. That's sketchy. Like, I want to know why these companies benefited from this, and I want to know the inner workings about that meeting, but I get hung up on 7-Eleven. Like, that just seems like some stoner who's, like, helping other stoners out, being like, dude, trust me, we need that extra hour. Like, I can't imagine why 7-Eleven would have interest in this. Companies as big as Clorox or Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, whoever owns them, that makes more sense. There's something maniacal going on back there. I didn't get the 7-Eleven one. That was weird to me. But there is something that's keeping it going. A lot of the statistics showed me that as recently as 2013, surveys have been done here in America showing that 0.5% of energy is saved due to daylight savings time and us having an extra hour of daylight after work, therefore not needing to use incandescent bulbs. I understand why it was important back then. However, I don't see how somebody proposed this to collect insects. There was another man, William Willett, here in America, who also proposed it, and that motherfucker just wanted it so he could golf. You guys, I'm not even, like, making this shit up. It doesn't make sense. The people who proposed it had dumb-ass reasons. Although, maybe life in 1905 was just like, hey, I want to fucking golf. Like, maybe that was just their Kardashian. Okay? Let's all calm down. Okay, but it did have me thinking. I've recently been watching Ancient Aliens, okay, the History Channel, love that dude's hair, wow. But they brought up a really interesting fact about how throughout human history, when somebody discovers something that's going to revolutionize how human beings live, let's take something like the light bulb, let's take something like the television, let's take something like the wheel, right? We're taking things that are so important and so vital, almost to everyday use, for almost everyone globally, that it's really going to change how we shape the world. When those people come up with this idea, they were talking about how if you go to a patent office or if you look up legislation, they're usually not the only person that did it. Usually there's a spike in a time period when something is supposed to be discovered, and then if one person doesn't get there or doesn't choose that path, there's always like another one. If you look these up, they're really fascinating. And that was just like a side thought I had, but it's kind of going against what I feel because I hate the daylight savings time idea. I want us to pick a time, stay with that time, and you have to get up damn early in the morning in the winter if you want some sunlight, but also your sunset's gonna be real fucking early. So, I mean, I'd rather almost deal, maybe it's better, I don't know, I don't honestly care enough. I just thought this was really fascinating. But there is something to be said about two men, different sides of the world, figuring this out at almost the same time, and both for really dumb reasons. I mean, I get it, you're driving by the coffee shop and you're like, oh no, Patricia's not there, no one's there, why is everyone sleeping? Like, I get it. I get, like, people probably would have thought, hey, what if we made daylight earlier? But dumb reasons, dumb men, ugh. But I'm not, like, the only one who thinks that's super obnoxious, right? Like, ugh. Anyway, there was one last thing I thought was super fascinating, and that was in 1965, my little state of Minnesota, where I've slung back a cocktail or two, actually had its capital city of St. Paul and then its bustling, awesome city of Minneapolis on two different time zones. And the only thing that dissects them is, like, the Minnesota River. So weird. I can't believe that happened. But it did say that St. Paul opted to follow the nation in adopting daylight savings, with Minneapolis choosing to wait till the following year when it was mandated by the state's law. That's fucking weird and fascinating. And why do we do the things we do? One may never know. Anyway, if you cared at all about if you are still watching this video, applause, because I cannot imagine all of this absolutely non-useful information was fun. However, it was fascinating to me to learn all of this, and please, if you want to interject with any thoughts regarding daylight savings time or anything else, please leave a comment below, and I look forward to reading them, and I will see all y'alls tomorrow.